not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Caitlin from Leave Me Alone Plants, and today I wanted to share with you guys some houseplant hacks that I've learned over the years of caring for a ton of houseplants that are not total
bullshit. Who's this man?
If you've been on the internet for any extended period of time, then you've probably come across videos from Blossom or 5 Minute Crafts or some other variety of these life hack channels. And if you've ever watched one of their videos, then you also probably know that they're typically not hacks, like not at all, not even close. So for that reason, today I wanted to share with you some houseplant hacks that actually have saved me a ton of time over the years and hopefully are something that can save you guys time too. So with that said, let's roll the intro and get on into it. Okay, so this first hack is one that became a lifesaver the longer that I lived in Arizona, and that is my strategy for repotting cacti and succulents. Now, of course, the reason why this is so important to me is because living here in the desert, my collection of prickly little guys has gotten quite extensive. And although cacti and succulents tend to be really slow growers, eventually they do come to the point where you need to repot them into a bigger pot. And that, at least for me, is always a horrifying prospect because I live perpetually in fear of getting stuck by cacti needles. So let me share the pain-free way to repot these cacti. First thing you're going to want to do in advance to prep for this is not water your cacti for a while. Now, if you're caring for your cacti how you should, this probably will be pretty easy because you don't water them that often, but if for whatever reason you have just watered it, wait it out a little bit until your soil is really dry and kind of clumped together. Once it's all one solid, lumpy, clumpy mound, then what you're going to want to do is get something to poke into this soil. Now, my utensil of choice tends to be these little wooden chopsticks. However, you can use whatever you want that is basically just long enough to get itself into the soil, anchored in, and still have enough room for you to grab onto it. So something like a fork or a knife, all would probably work. A knife might be a little difficult because it might start to break up that soil. Really, you're looking for something that's very, very thin and very long. Don't know why my mind went to a non-plant related topic, but moving along. Once you find your utensil that you're going to use, stick them into the soil. Use about 3 or 4 of them depending on how big or small your hands are. And once they're anchored in there real good, you're slowly but surely just going to lift up on them, and if all goes well, your plant should just arise out of the soil. Now, a few things to note here. If your plant is bigger or heavier, you are going to want to use more than less sticks to kind of distribute the load. If you're just using like 1 stick, it may not be enough to pull all the plant out of the soil. Additionally, you want to be gentle while you do this, not to disturb the soil too much, but if it seems like your roots are kind of stuck to the side of the pot, which can definitely happen if it's inside something like a terracotta or just something that's a little more porous, then try and give it just a little wiggle or just a little scrape around the edge to loosen up those roots that might be stuck to the pot and keeping it in there. From there, you'll have your cacti out of the pot. You can just place it right into the new pot, or if you want to dislodge some soil, you can do that and just reposition your skewers as so to get it into the new pot. And there you go. You have a freshly repotted cacti without any little prickers in your hand, which for me was an absolute game changer. This next tip is one that I've recently been using for my gardening shoots, but you can totally use it for propagating houseplants, and it's a really good method to make sure that once you start propagating it, it's not going to die off after the fact. Okay, this next tip that we're going to do is super great, mainly because you probably have the supplies that you needed for it sitting right at your house, or at least I would assume so, unless we're having another repeat of the 2020 toilet paper situation again. So the main thing you're going to need for this hack are these toilet paper rolls, which again, assuming you have at your house, some scissors, this tape is optional depending on what you're looking to do with this hack, and then just some soil and some things that you're looking to prop up. So very first thing that you're going to want to do, take your toilet paper roll and on the 4 corners, obviously circles don't have corners, but at 4 even points on every side of your circle, you're just going to want to make a cut about 1.5 inches down. I think it's 1.5 inches. I'm not really good with measurements, but it feels right. Feels like 1.5 inches, I guess. And then from here, now that you have these 4 kind of squares that will fold out on either way, you're just going to want to kind of fold them in like a present on themselves. Now from here, depending on what you're looking for with this hack, you can just kind of let them fold in and let gravity hold them down if you place them upright, or if you're looking for a little more of a secure hold, you can use this piece of tape. Just note that if you do use a piece of tape to secure it at the bottom, it is no longer going to be 100% biodegradable. So, you know, maybe do that, or I don't know, is masking tape biodegradable? It feels like it is. Somebody please let me know down below. I just looked into it. Scotch tape is not biodegradable. However, cellulose tape is. I have no idea what that is, but if you can find some, fantastic. Next thing you're gonna wanna do is just get your little stem that you're propagating. So right here, I have some spaghetti squash, just a little starter that I am looking to put in my garden, and I just wanna give it a little time to acclimate before I put it outdoors. I have been starting these inside. So as you can see, mine has roots, but if yours does not, totally fine. From here, you're just gonna wanna start and fill up a little bit of soil into your toilet paper holder. So it's got a little bit of a base at the bottom, just like you're filling up a normal pot. Then place your little cutting in there, roots or no roots, either way, it's all good. And just fill it up the rest of the way from there. Now, the reason that these little repurposed toilet paper holder biodegradable plant holders are so great is because instead of normal propagation where you're popping in water or popping in a really tiny pot and then transplanting it into a bigger pot once it's ready, these are so awesome because when they start to outgrow this, you can actually just pot them right inside a bigger pot without having to disturb the roots at all. So you're not gonna see that rebound cycle when you're, you know, unpotting and repotting and disturbing the roots. You just plop it right in there, and once you begin to water and care for it, then just naturally the paper will slowly break down and you'll be good to go with a brand new plant. This next tip is one I wasn't even gonna bring up in this video because I had sporadically mentioned it in some other plant care videos, but so often people comment and say that it was a really helpful tip, so I thought it'd be worthwhile throwing in here. And that is using the Google app to photo ID plants that you don't know what they are. We've all been there where you're at the nursery or you're at your friend's house or you're just at like a hotel who happens to have a really magnificent plant set, and you see this plant, it's majestic and beautiful, you're like, oh my god, what is that? While I used to go to the Facebook plant groups and share a picture of it, and inevitably there was always somebody who could ID that plant for me, if I wanted a more immediate answer, this is the route that I go. So download the Google app. I'm assuming it's available for whatever phone you have. I have an iPhone, it's available there, and certainly I'm sure it's available on Android. Open it up, and what you'll see on the search icon, don't search anything, but click that little camera. And when you go to click that camera, what it's going to do is take a picture of the plant. And 9 times out of 10, once you capture it, it's going to pull up articles and pictures of the plant that you are currently looking at. And from there, you can kind of ID what it is. Now you'll see in this example that because the plant that I'm looking at, I refer to it as a mandarin plant. I know that it came up as a different name, but it's part of the spider plant species. So it is common that you'll have other similar plants or plants that are related to it come up when you pull that plant up. So sometimes you do have to search a little bit through the search results, but almost always you will find what you're looking for and you can ID your plant from there. So this has saved me in so many scenarios, and I hope that it can help you ID the next plant that you fall in love with as well. This next hack is specifically for watering. And if there's any area where people go wrong with plants or kill their plants, or at least I tend to kill my plants, I feel like it's surrounding watering. Now personally, I tend to be somebody who way underwaters, and that's mostly just because, to be honest, I'm pretty lazy. If I'm being frank, I have a decently large collection of plants, and staying on top of watering them all can be quite the chore. More specifically, due to the mess that watering can make. I have such a wide range of pots that my plants sit in, and it's really 50-50 across the board if those plants have holes in the bottom or if they do not have holes in the bottom. And if you're new to houseplants, you might be thinking, why in the world would your pot have holes in the bottom? But stay with me because it's actually a good thing. But what that turns into is that when I go and water my plants, it tends to be this fun like Russian roulette game of, if I water my plant, is it going to spill all over my countertops? So what I have recently been doing instead, and has been really helpful to water my plants very, very quickly, is filling up my bathtub with water and placing my plants in the bottom of there. This lets you water so many plants at once through bottom watering, which in my opinion is the superior way to water your plants. Now at this point, if you're completely confused and wondering how you placing plants in a bathtub is going to water them, let me explain. Many plants, particularly when you buy them from the nursery, will come in these handy dandy little nursery pots, and almost every nursery pot that I've ever seen in the world at the bottom will have all of these holes in them. And the great thing about that is that, for one, it allows water to drain out if too much water gets in the pot so that you don't get root rot, but conversely, it allows water to get sucked up the bottom of the plant through a process called capillary action. What I love about this process even more is when fertilizing comes into play. So, you may or may not know, but one of the things you want to do before fertilizing your plants is actually water them thoroughly so that when you go and fertilize them, there isn't like harsh chemicals sitting on the roots. What is even easier here is that you can actually, if you don't really care about your bathtub, throw the fertilizer right into the water, and after it has already drank up the water, it will continue to suck up that fertilizer to the amount that it needs. Now, if you're living somewhere where maybe you don't have a bathtub like this happens to be my spare bathroom, so I completely dedicate it towards putting plants in there. You don't have to do it in a bathroom per se. I've seen people get those big kiddie pools and do that outside of their house if that's an option that you want to go through, or you can even do it on a smaller scale by getting trays and filling those trays up with water and putting your plants on there as well. So overall, if you've never tried bottom watering, and particularly tried bottom watering multiple plants at once, I promise you it will really speed up your watering process and overall keep your plants really happy and healthy if you're somebody like me who doesn't like to water often. One last note before we move on, just don't forget to take your plants out of the bathtub and don't leave them in standing water for, I'd say, more than an hour at most. Otherwise they can ultimately get root rot and nobody wants that. This next tip is how I like to rehab my plants. And while everybody kind of has their different special way that they like to rehab their plants, for me, I've had the most success with this, and this is by putting them in a terrarium. Now, terrariums are really great for a variety of reasons. For one, if you're somebody like me again who forgets to water often, they tend to hold in their water a lot better because they're kind of a closed little ecosystem. Additionally, because they tend to be globed up and only have a small hole for you to put your hand in, they hold in the humidity really well also. So if you live somewhere like the desert, like myself, and you have poor humidity, this is a great way to be able to have those humidity-loving plants kind of acclimate into their home and get that humidity that they need, at least on the onset of their journey. As you can see in this terrarium here, I have a variety of plants stuffed in here. Now, one thing you will want to keep in mind is making sure if you do have different plants inside this terrarium is to put plants that have similar care requirements. So you wouldn't want to put something like a calathea next to a succulent. Obviously very different care requirements, but as long as they're generally similar, this is going to allow you to have a way more watchful eye over multiple plants as opposed to having them in tiny little pots that easily dry out and are just difficult to take care of. So overall, I really enjoy this method. One bonus tip that you'll see inside my terrarium is that I kind of line the top of the soil with moss. This isn't just for decorative purposes, although I will say I think that it makes it look pretty snazzy in there. The thing about putting moss on the top of your plants, particularly those moisture-loving plants like ferns or calatheas, is that it really locks that moisture and it's almost like a mulch on the top of the soil. You'll actually see me do this even in my non-terrarium plants. I'm not sure if you'll see it in there, but I have the top lined with sheet moss. Now, again, you can use reindeer moss or sheet moss or moss that you pull out of the back of your yard. It really doesn't matter. Just kind of having that living layer on top of there just really make sure that you're trapping in that moisture and almost replicating more of a natural environment that it might have if it was living outdoors. The next tip I have has to do with what you do with your plants when they die. Now, if you're anything like me, you have killed a fair share of houseplants in your day. I've killed a lot. And while I used to just kind of take them and throw them out when they died, or even worse, hang on to them for dear life, hoping that they would just magically come back to life, I now have something different that I like to do with them, and that's reusing and composting them. I'll be the first person to say when I first started looking into composting, I definitely thought that it was like kind of extreme and not something that I would ever be into, and I assumed it was like gross and smelly, just like so many bad things. But hold in there a few more seconds. So basically how composting works is you take dead plant materials or even just dead organic materials and you kind of pile them on top of each other. And what you're going to want to do is constantly turn these materials and rotate them, and slowly over time by natural processes they're just going to begin to break down. Again, at this point you may be thinking to yourself, Caitlin, why do I even care if they break down? That's why I throw them in the garbage. No. Trust me. The reason that you want to hold on to these broken down plant materials and whatever else you're putting in your compost is because you can use it as natural fertilizer, like the best fertilizer. After a couple of weeks to months of turning and rotating these materials around and having them break down, they'll turn into this really dense, thick soil. And it's super nutrient rich and can be mixed into your other potting soils to really give your plants a boost that they are absolutely going to love. But the great thing about composting is you can start as small or as large as you want. I literally just have a 5-gallon bucket in the back of my garden that I manually rotate by hand every couple days. And during the warmer months, I've already pulled 3 full buckets of compost out of this. It can happen really, really fast. And if you're interested in this process, there are a ton of videos out there that will describe how to do this process from start to finish in a really, really simple way. Overall, for me, it has not only given me a free way to fertilize my plants, but it also just makes me feel better when one of my plant dies that I'm not just throwing into the garbage, but it's basically bringing life back into my other plants that are still alive. Let me know down below if you've ever tried composting, and if you haven't, let me know if it's something that you would be interested in trying or maybe even seeing videos on in the future, because I'm not gonna lie, I've been having a lot of fun with it. Final tip that I'll leave you with today, I guess is technically not a houseplant tip, but I feel like it is. And that is to go out and buy yourself a handheld vacuum. And let me tell you why. If you have any decent sized plant collection, or actually even if you just even have like one plant, you probably know that there's just constant messes associated with plants, whether they're dropping leaves, or you accidentally knock it over and there's dirt everywhere, or you're filming YouTube videos and getting dirt all over your carpet. Whatever the case may be, a lot of cleanup that comes around houseplant. And I'll just be the first one to say, sometimes I don't care for my houseplants because I don't want to deal with the mess that is going to be cleaned up afterwards. However, these little handheld vacuums make it so easy. You don't need to plug anything in, you don't need to get it out of your closet, you literally just grab it, suck up the mess, and are done. Now you can buy them from a wide range of prices on Amazon. They start around $30 and can go up to like $200. I've used both ends of the spectrum, and I will just tell you, the cheap ones work 100% fine. This isn't like a sponsored thing at all, it's just something that I've recently purchased and have been really enjoying a lot, so I encourage you, if you don't have one of these little handheld vacuums for cleaning up messes, go out and get yourself one. I will link my two favorites down in the description below. With that said, those are all the tips that I had for today. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this was like at least one step tier above what you get on 5-minute crafts. If you've stuck around this long in the video, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can get more great hack videos like this in the future, and hit that like button because it actually helps me out a lot. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.